Hello, and welcome to this edition, August edition of TAM Talks, where we talk to Desmond Bertrand-Pitts. In this series of TAM Talks, I interview Texas museum leaders on their institutions and how they're addressing the greatest challenges they are facing today. Desmond Bertrand-Pitts is the Chief Executive Officer of the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum Center for African American Military History. Welcome, Desmond.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have today.
Great. All right, Desmond, my first question for you is can you let us know how you got into museum work?
Yeah, interesting story. I feel like I've answered this question probably like 100,000 times. I always say that I was voluntold from the very beginning. It's not necessarily me saying, hey, I want to volunteer. You know, I'm excited about museum work. I was in high school at the time, and the museum opened in 2001. And interesting story, my grandfather is the founder of the Buffalo Soldier Museum. So that's why I tell people I was voluntold. So I really didn't have a choice at the time, but I fell in love with the museum. From even before it started, just from the conception of it, him collecting artifacts for over 30 years, my entire life, I've seen Buffalo Soldier artifacts and stories and books and things of that sort. So I had always knew the story and how much depth was involved in it and how much rich history is involved in it. Not a history buff, so I wasn't that, driven to the work. But, I fell in love with it because of his passion and because of the story. And after volunteering, interning, I literally have done everything in the museum, from mopping floors to creating, exhibitions, which something I never thought that I would do. And now to, the position that I have now, it's pretty much, it covers all the bases. So I started out as, a volunteer, and it's a part of my family, and it just became a career. I don't come from a background of, museum history or museum studies. My bachelor's is in biology, of all things. I wanted to be a doctor, but that didn't work out. And then I went into a master's program in business and really found my suit there. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to run something. I wanted to be a part of, building something. And then I got a master's in educational leadership. So I tied those two things together, and people always ask, like, well, how does that, fit in with museum? Well, it fit perfectly, because in my position, I'm running a business. It may be a nonprofit entity, but it's still a business, and there's profit in nonprofit. So people really kind of get confused with that, but there is. And then education, educational leadership is that I'm an educator. I went back to school time and time again. I've been taught for a while. So it's part of who I am. I just don't want to teach in front of the classroom. So I have the ability now to create programs and create, ideas for programs and curriculum and things of that sort. So it all kind of ties into it. And then my background in terms of history is just what I've learned over the course of, me being around the museum. There's some questions that I can't answer, because I'm not a curator and I'm not, a historian, but, I have the passion behind it for the work that I do. But, I can always make a short question long, because you can always tell my passion or somebody's passion for how they answer questions, because I went on a tangent. But yes, I started out as a volunteer, which, created opportunities there. That's why I'm a huge proponent of and advocate for internships. Starting out with internships, I have an intern here who started with us a few years ago, and now she's the visitor services manager. So started as a volunteer, and here I am.
Yeah. Well, great. It sounds like you have a unique situation where you're really tied to the history, to to the founders of the museum. So, so tell us a little bit about the museum, how it got started, how your grandfather started his collection that turned into what we see today.
Absolutely. That's a good story too. I can remember attending, so there's an association called the 9th and 10th Horse Cavalry Association. So it's a division, it's an association that was created out of basically in honor of the Buffalo Soldiers. So a lot of these men weren't Buffalo Soldiers. I mean, because it's, we're talking 1866, but what we call spiritual descendants. So that's what my grandfather is. He's a Vietnam veteran, so he does have the history of, being involved in the military, but there's no direct linkage in terms of the Buffalo Soldiers. So what generally interested him was reading a paragraph about the Buffalo Soldiers in a history course that he took at PV, Prairie View A&M University in Prairie View, Texas, and was like, wow, this is such a great story. And as we know in history and in school, there's only so much that they can cover, and then there's not full history, the full story anyway, even if they could cover it in those books. So he started doing research, started collecting more books and things of that sort at that time. And over the course of about 30 years, the collection had grew into a mini museum inside the house. So during that time, there was a lot of the conferences I was talking about, the 9th and 10th Horse Cavalry Association, and then there's artifacts that's being shared and things of the sort throughout that time. And there was stuff, not stuff, but artifacts and books in the garage and upstairs where I was, whenever I was at my grandparents' house. So I had, books, on my shelf that I didn't really pick up. So I won't lie and say that I picked it up and read about the Buffalo Soldiers. But, from the stories that he told, I definitely got a good grasp of who these guys were. And I can remember the conversation, actually a few conversations, but it was one in particular where basically my grandmother was like, okay, so we got to get this stuff out. And there might have been a few there might have been a few choice words, but she's not, she doesn't have a filthy mouth. But at that time, it was pure frustration. But I call her the real founder of the museum because had it not been for her saying, "Hey, this stuff has got to go," that they wouldn't have signaled a light bulb on the top of my grandfather's head. It was like, oh, okay, so yeah, we can do this.
She gave him a nudge. She gave
him a nudge. Absolutely. And that's what, significant others do anyway, right? Yeah. without any intentionality behind it, that's what she did. And so the museum opened in 2001. Before it actually opened, he got a group of friends together. He's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. So got them together saying, hey, I'm going to put my retirement funds into creating this museum, match me, do that type of thing. He's that type of player, and just started bringing in more people, and more people were interested. And in January 5th, 2001, we opened our doors on Alameda and Sophomore. I call it a shack, but people are like, that was not a shack. It was actually a 2-story building. There was a law firm on the second level, so the museum was only on the first level of that building. And then it's really strangely constructed. So there was a house somewhat attached to the building that we were in. So there was a tenant in the house that was attached to it. And a few years went by, we had grew to a point to where we needed some space on the second floor. So we got the architects. It was architects on the second floor. We got architects to get 2 of their spaces, and then they were just in one office. And then a year or so went by, we had that space. So we had the entire building. And then fast forward years later, we ended up purchasing the house next door to it. So we ended up being on the entire property. And then in 2008, after talks with the city, we purchased the building we're in now, the Houston Light Guard Armory. And so it took us from 2008-ish to 2012 to actually move into the building. And this is a 24,000 square foot building where we come from about 2,500, to 4,000. So it kind of moved fast. We're in our 20th year. I think of the museum as more of an institution. We've been able to develop programs and exhibitions and things over the years, especially during my tenure here. We've really stepped up our game in terms of what we're offering the community. And people know us as the Buffalo Soldiers Museum, but we're really the Center for African American Military History. We exhibit the entire African American military experience. And my grandfather says it all the time, and I use it too. So I've taken some of his statements where, although we focused on and feature the African American story, we're an American history institution. And that's what we showcase. And that's what we want the world to kind of know, is that the history that we share here is everyone's history. There's something that anybody that walks through the door can immediately, there's something that you find here that you can relate to. And that's what we do.
Well, great. Well, let's take us to today. And I know that part of the series is really examining some of the challenges and that museums are facing today. And I know there's no end of challenges, especially with the pandemic being changing how we approach fundraising and strategic planning and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you're facing there at the museum?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think we need to talk about 2020 and COVID and the top of 2021, and even now, that we all know that was just a bunch of craziness. So I'm sure our challenges were a lot similar in terms of the museum industry. I think for me, a little more personally, for me as a leader, I was really, really affected. And I've had conversations with colleagues, and we've all kind of dealt with similar things, but it was really a lot going on last year. We're talking about, the police brutality and social rise of social injustices and COVID-19 and money's just draining, and where are the resources coming from? When can we reopen? It was all of that like at once. So personally, as a leader, that was my challenge, is like, how do I balance this in the midst of craziness? Because nobody else is probably balancing at this time. So who do I talk to? And it's one of those things where you need like an outside source to talk to. And at that time, we started having conversations and using the museum as a resource. Like, let's talk about how COVID-19 is affecting African American lives, and how the social justice and COVID all being in one. How can we continue to talk the narrative? So we were doing that from a museum standpoint, but it was also helping me. So mental health is real. It's a struggle, and especially during this time. And how are we managing that? Not even from the day-to-day person, working hourly wage at the front of the museum, but to the executive levels, leaders. Like, how are they dealing with that? So it's all of those things combined. We don't think about how do we support those people that are up here. So it was one of those. That was a huge challenge for me and for us. It's like, how do we remain relevant? We need to talk about what the community is dealing with, and not so much, to not to avoid like mission drift. And we're a military history museum. So how does that relate? But it's our community, it's our audience. So that was a huge challenge that we had to face, and overcoming that was us saying, hey, this does make sense. This fits right in line of who we are, because we're engaging with our audience, our community, and this is what they're saying. Hey, this is what we need help with. So that was a way of us saying, hey, we hear you. Let's offer this. Let's be able to be that resource or be that place. And some of the other things that we are really in the thick of now, we're not in the thick of, but we're actually in the beginning stages of, is our strategic planning. So we're in our 20th year. We started in 2001. This is 2021. We wanted to do a huge year full of, celebrations and, all kind of engagement, with members and our audiences. But, that didn't happen. So we did have our gala in July. So that went off well. It was a hybrid event. We limited the amount of people inside the space, and then the rest was virtual. So we gave, different ticketing options. It went really, really well, but I really felt that was a challenge to this virtual world to be. We're still dealing with trying to, be okay with our programs and things being virtual. It's not the best, especially for museums. We're heavily, person-to-person contact engagement industry. But yes, we are starting our strategic planning process. And it's really exciting to me. Some people don't understand it, like that's gonna be a lot of work, it's a lot of planning, it's a lot of writing, it's a lot of this, and they're gonna review all of your stuff. But that's the exciting part to me, because I know that right now is the best time for the museum to do it.
Yeah.
It's really the best time for all museums to really kind of get that started. But for us, it's particularly important because we have a $10 million campaign that we're in the silent phase of. So we're talking to foundations and building that philanthropic support, before we really, really release it out to, the public to kind of gauge their support. So that's going to help us build that out. It's really going to help kind of me in terms of my leadership. I have the vision now, behind the museum. So everybody's looking at me like, hey, where are you going with this museum? What's happening? And I can, talk about it all day like I'm doing now, because I am a visionary, I'm a creative, and I have these ideas and I have the passion, and I can spew it out in a conversation, any day. But when you're talking about putting it on paper, and this is 1, 2, 3 of what I want to do and how I get there, and what it's going to take to get there, and what's the outcomes and the reports, that's not me. I'm not that guy. I appreciate it once we receive it, but that's what, I'm not the person to put all that stuff into place. I can give you all of the vision and all of the ideas that's behind it, but we need that support to build it out. And so that's what excites me about this process. Like, yeah, it's going to be a lot of work, but I'm not scared. I think we have been preparing for this moment for quite some time, and for the next 5 years. And it's going to be clear of what we're doing, where we're going, where we are, what we want to accomplish. And even beyond that, our planning is going to be beyond the 5 years. We want to have a scope of, 10 years or so. And that might be scary for most people. But I think for us, it'll kind of set the tone, even though we're going to probably veer from it. We don't know what's happening with, COVID right now. But, fingers crossed, it'll be done, by the end of the year, and we don't have to worry about it. But there's other things that come up, but that's a part of the planning. So, emergency plans and things in place, that's really exciting to me. And I think putting that plan is going to help us to overcome staffing issues, fundraising issues, things that we have been dealing with for a few years now. Any new staff or new people we have coming on to work with us, I say, we're building a museum. We're being old stage. We're trying to figure out who we're going to be for the next 20 years. And that's a huge, that's not a small feat. That's a huge staff to take on. So even when we're looking for staff, we're looking for people that's going to help to kind of build out departments. Because when I came on, 5 years ago, it was me, and I was all of the departments.
Yeah,
but now
wearing all the hats, huh?
Wearing all the hats, and now we're getting to a point where we're building it out. We got a director of development. We have visitor services manager. We have a venue manager. So we have those things, and we're continuing to build out those departments. And the strategic planning process or redevelopment process is what we're calling it. And I think that speaks more to what we're doing, is going to help us overcome a lot of those obstacles that we've seen in recent years.
Well, great. So before we wrap up, I want to, you have the opportunity, you're speaking directly to our members and the people in our community. Is there anything that you need help with, or things that you'd like to pitch out there so that people can get engaged with you? That's one of the great things I love about TAM, is we're a hub for this kind of conversation. You might need this and somebody might have it. Is there anything that comes to mind?
It's interesting that you say that. And then the conversation we had earlier about some of the other, TAM talks that you've had, exhibitions and sharing resources and, programmatic ideas and ways to collaborate. Those things are really and attractive to me, because I think that we can all really, really get a good, any messaging that we're trying to get across, we can do that so much in a greater capacity when we're doing it together. I know for us, being African American Military History Museum, that's not pretty much anybody else doing what we're doing. So there may be, we have to be more creative on whatever we're working on together. But we've been able to do that here in Houston, and some of the partners that we've used, like, it makes a lot of things make sense together. We work with the Young Center here in Houston. We work with a lot of the universities here in Houston on, some webinars and things that we've done. AARP is a good partner of ours as well. And a lot of people reach out to veteran service organizations. So there's always something that we can collaborate on. So I would just, my call to action would be like, reach out. I have some great ideas that I might be able to share. And with TAM, like you said, it's a really good network of people. So I've been able to do that a lot. We've worked with the 1940 Air Terminal Museum and some of the other TAM members. So just being able to kind of grow that, I think we should continue to kind of collaborate and share ideas and resources. I think that would be the best way to help us out. It's like, just call your boy, or email me or something, just say, hey, I've got this going on, or I think we can work together on this. And I need to do more of it too. So it's a call to action to myself too, is, reach out to the people that you're connected with already. And I think we don't do that enough. So yeah, that's something. Just go out there and meet people and network and stuff.
All right, you heard that, everyone. Yeah. Give Desmond an email or a ring, and if you have any ideas on how to collaborate. Yes, I was at the Health Museum. I think you're doing something with the Health Museum.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So really great to see that. And we have we have a blog post that's coming out this week with Ed Rodley of our Finding Alternative Futures program that y'all were part of. We're with our second cohort, and we're talking about online public programming, and a big part of that is partnerships and collaborations. Working together to share audiences, or you're trying to reach a new audience, or enrich an exhibition. These are great. There's great museums in Texas that you can tap into to collaborate.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up and let us know what's happening in the future. Anything coming down the road?
Yeah, most of our all of our programming now through the end of the year is pretty much virtual. Any in-person things will be limited to 30 people or less outside of our venue rental, where we rent out the facility. We have creative arts therapy that we're working to get in the pipeline in September. We're doing a virtual boot camp with our partners at Combined Arms at the end of September. All of this information is on the website, and will be on the website. In October, we're doing a collage party and a paint party, and all of these are in partnership with AARP and Centerpoint as well, Centerpoint Energy. And then I think in November, we're doing a virtual sip and learn. So the interesting thing about that, I know a lot of people are doing the virtual, happy hours and things of that sort. But ours is going to be, we're making drinks that were military inspired. So it was one of those things where how do we, get some drinks in, but also make it educational. But honestly, I didn't know that, drinks were inspired from military, actually some crafted cocktails came from the military. So I was like, yeah, that'll be a perfect marriage. Like let's put those two things together, talk about the history as we're mixing those cocktails, how those things started. So that's going to be a really fun one, and that's in November. And that kind of wraps out the year. In between that time, we have military inspired art. We actually just put up a lot of the art pieces that we've gotten from around the country. And we're putting the descriptions up. So that's soon to be released in terms of, releasing, like having like an opening reception, which is going to be really small, but also doing artist talks throughout the rest of the exhibition. So MIA is one of those, is my baby, actually. I started it in 2018. It was one of those things where I didn't know that I was going to be curating an exhibit and creating a whole like symposium, but it turned out to be a thing with workshops and artists and talking about PTSD and how to use artist therapy. And it's just this huge thing now. And so we do have an opportunity now to kind of take that to the next level once we get out of this virtual age and, COVID era. So yeah, that's coming up. And I said at the gala in July, like, we've been here for 20 years, but you ain't seen nothing yet. Yeah. Like, the museum is at a good place, and we're going to have some good things coming down the pipeline. So 2022 and beyond will be really, really monumental for us.
Excellent. As you move into your second decade of operations. Well, that's great. It's great talking to you today, Desmond, and I want to thank you on behalf of TAM. You also serve on TAM as a counselor at large, so we do appreciate your leadership here as well. So you heard it here, folks. Get in touch with Desmond if you have any ideas on ways to collaborate, to partner, and I'll tune into the sipping program. I definitely enjoy those.
Absolutely.
So with that, I want to thank you for joining us and saying goodbye for today.